because I was late that day when you were waiting for me with Max. I totally remember.
And I still come across, I live over by the river or something in West Alameda. So I hike that river trail and I still come across.
Take pictures for me.
Okay.
Seriously. They all are. Except there's the one year.
Waiting for that sneeze.
The sign just came off and Max is fixing it.
When they took the one.
But if that ever happens, please let me know right away because Max is great at completing every time.
I saw them.
Oh, and take a picture of yourself in it. No, people have been sending you so
Oh yeah.
And a lot of one with her former dog. She would send me pictures.
Oh. So I saved him. Well, sometimes
Thanks, it's me too.
I saved him a seat on the front row just for the introduction.
Oh, I'm just gonna grab the mic, walk up, and do my thing. Hello, how are you? Good, how are you? Well, thank you. Hey, I'll get them for you.
I saw Izzy.
You're welcome.
Okay, perfect. They're in Montreal today. He has a trans daughter. He is Israel, so I want to know where his daughter.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Right.
Hey, good.
Very cute. There
Of course, yeah.
people on the piano.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I saw you walking around. Yeah. But we're already most of the way there. Interesting.
It looks like, oh my God, it is.
Yeah, the acoustics are good. As long as it's up. And the chair sounds very good. It's over there, and right now it goes from sort of this corner over by the tracks down towards La Chosa, Allery Street, but then on Monday and Tuesday it'll get needed from here all the way up to
Yeah, that's the intro. Yeah.
so still, you didn't see it yet, yeah.
So they live there. He's been working at a when you turn 70, I think lots about to start to appear. Turn 59. Yeah. 57. Yeah. Good to see you. Good to see you. All right, say hello. Whatever you like, just that's what people know.
Because otherwise they'll go to that other thing over there. I'm not trying to go back to you.
Hi there, everyone. I thank you so much for coming out. This is a beautiful day out there, so I'm glad that people came out and want to hear about some art, some very wonderful artwork in the Railyard Park. My name is Izzy Barr. I'm the executive director of the Railyard Park Conservancy, and we are so honored to be hosting Missing Waters, the project, and the talk today through our Railyard Art Project, which facilitates the installation of temporary art in the Railyard Park Plaza. So this is a grant-funded project that we are facilitating through. We got a grant from the Santa Fe Department of Arts and Culture and New Mexico Arts. So we're really thankful to them for and allowing us to have art in the park, because otherwise we wouldn't. We really hit the jackpot with this project. It's kind of everything that it's all the pillars of our program. Thank you.
You're good. The
Wah,
slide
wah, wah.
started to go.
Oh, did it? It's because I was leaning on the. Am I? That's so cool. Okay. Thank you for coming. That'll do it for today. I appreciate you being here. I am not an artist. Anyway, this project combines everything that we want in a public art project. It's art, it's ecology, history, and really importantly to our organization, because we are entirely community-based, it has community collaboration. We had at least 20 people, probably 20 to 20, probably 30 people come out on, that was just Friday, wasn't it? Yeah, on Friday to help install what the part of the project that's there right now on the rail trail. We're going to be working with 80 students from New Mexico School for the Arts on Monday and Tuesday to finish the installation over in the Railyard area. But I think almost as important, actually probably more importantly to us too, it's been an absolute joy to work with Stacy Levy and Patricia Watts. It's been fun, it's been collaborative. I've learned a lot. We've all learned a lot. So I'm going to stop talking here as soon as I introduce Patricia. Patricia Watts is going to be moderating our panel today. She's the founder and curator of ecoartspace, an online membership platform with over 2,000 artists and scientists participating from 29 countries since 2020. She's organized over 40 art and ecology exhibitions at a range of traditional and non-traditional art venues, and has published numerous artist monographs and exhibition catalogs in the last decade. Before moving to Santa Fe full-time in 2019, Watts worked as a watershed coordinator for the Topanga Creek watershed in California, chief curator at the Sonoma County Museum in Northern California, and consulting curator for the Marin Community Foundation in Nevada. She's curated several exhibitions and programs focused on water, including Waterworks, Works on Water, Delta Waters, and Shifting Baselines, which was a residency and exhibition at the Santa Fe Art Institute in 2013. She also authored High Water Line, an action guide based on a performative public artwork in New York City. In 2016, Watts curated and project managed a permanent public artwork known as Cloud House, which includes a rain harvesting system that provides a sensory experience to illuminate the water cycle. In 2021 and 2022, she curated a series of almost 30 I Am Water billboards in New York City. And last year, Watts curated Where There Is No Name for Art at the Audubon Center here in Santa Fe, including an ephemeral indigenous water serpent site work and a series of check dams along the hiking trails. Patricia.
So, okay, thank you, Izzy. Yeah, I think we're all a little disoriented because we're sore from painting all day Friday. But yeah, it's been wonderful having Stacy here. I've worked with her before on a project, but not this intensely, so it's been great to have her here. So Stacy works with rain, urban tides, watersheds, microorganisms, using a blended language of science and art to tell an ecological story. Her work gives us a new understanding to the life of water on sites ranging from river surfaces to parking lots. Some of her projects highlight unseen life forms inhabiting local waterways, such as diatoms, while other projects create a home for rain. In making large-scale works, Stacy teams up with engineers, landscape architects, geologists, hydrologists, and biologists to develop treatment solutions for water pollution, sites for infiltration, and celebrating stormwater runoff, but also habitat for birds and insects. The scale of her work ranges from small puddles to large watersheds. She steers her projects to collaborate directly with natural processes, and while creating a visual metaphor for how urban nature works. She has an enduring love of urban tidal rivers and has worked with the East River and Hudson River, both in New York City, as well as the Schuylkill River in Philadelphia. Did I say that right? Schuylkill. Oh no, I lost my place, okay. Stacy recently completed a major public artwork, Diatom Lace. It's on the East Midtown Greenway in Manhattan. Gorgeous, gorgeous public artwork. It magnifies forms of common diatoms living in the East River, turning ordinary paving into an underfoot experience of the delicate architecture of the microalgae. Her waterfront project has received an award from the New York Society of Landscape Architects. That's one to look up online. Levy has created temporary and permanent works in, here's the long list, Philadelphia, New York City, Pittsburgh, Seattle, Phoenix, Tampa, Miami, San Antonio, Fayetteville, Arkansas, Baltimore, and in Canada, Scotland, Japan, and Taiwan. She holds a BA from Yale University in Art and Forestry, and an MFA from Tyler School of Art at Temple University, and she has also studied with the Architectural Association in London. She began as an urban forester in the mid-Atlantic region and has been making work in the public realm for 29 years. She was awarded the Henry Meigs Environmental Leadership Award, the Penn Future Award for Women in Conservation, and a Pew Fellowship in the Arts. She is currently Stormwater Artist in Residence for the City of Lancaster in Pennsylvania through the Engineering Department. So welcome, Stacy Levy.
I sound like a real person. And thanks everyone. This project has been really fun. I wanted to come out to Santa Fe because this is the bastion of a lot of water artists are out here, and to meet them and to work sort of underfoot has been a real thrill. And it's been great working with Patricia here, collaborators on this project. And Izzy Barr has made this project swim right along with a great flow, because it's not always easy to work in a public area. You have to keep the public in mind, puts the public in public art. And But when it works, it's really wonderful, and it's wonderful to be working with a lot of people and then having people walk right over your piece, as they should. It's quite a thrill to have your art so accessible. So I'm going to give a talk, and we're going to keep it there. You can see the railroad site. This is me thinking about where this project should go. I was thinking a lot about acequias. I actually learned about acequias when I was in San Antonio. That was the first time I ever saw one, and I thought it was such an interesting idea. But many of them are not running any longer, and I wanted to know what was running through this rail yard site. So on Friday, this past Friday, and again on Monday and Tuesday, we painted the missing waters of the Tenorio acequia that once ran through the rail yard. And we want to bring back a temporary visual memory of flow in that particular site. And also it's very important to have people experience the patterns that water makes. Water as a transparent body is fairly invisible to us, but has beautiful patterns that we miss when we look over to a river, or even just have the tap water on, and if we're running it through our tap and washing our hands, we don't see those extraordinary patterns. So I like to bring those to the fore of people's consciousness. When I'm working with water, I'm often thinking about, what does water really want? What is this thing, what desire? And is there some way that I can help that along? I know that water wants to run freely, to meander over time and space. Water works in both continuums, and that's hard for people to have a grip on. It doesn't want to be straightened nor delineated into wet or dry. Wet or dry didactic is all about something we've created, because most wet areas are sometimes wet, sometimes dry, and part of the time are soggy. And that's how water likes to exist. It doesn't want to be in one place or the other and never meet. It also wants to use its own patterns, these unbelievable meandering patterns, so beautiful, and yet something that we try and shake out of any river that we know and any streamway. It wants to find its own way across the land in dendritic patterns of watersheds. It doesn't want to be turned into something so perpendicular, but more of a branching pattern. Dendritic is from dendros, tree, the branching of trees, and that's the pattern that most watersheds take. It does not want to be told what to do through engineering. And if we would let water flow like it wants to, water would choose a much more meandering and more changeable path. It's a wonderful project where they let the river do what it wanted to do on your right side. But engineers have long wrestled with water by putting it into pipes. Humans have an affinity for pipes. And I have great admiration for early pipe use in Pompeii, say, but it's become very problematic because we simply pipe the entire watershed out from under our cities. This is Lancaster, and turn it into a sewage system. This is a brook, Roaring Brook's watershed in the 1700s, used to be that dendritic pattern, and now look at it. That's present day where it says dewatered. There's not a piece of it running above ground anymore, except when it rains. And we walk on old stream channels all the time. But we put those waterways underground in pipes because that dendritic pattern doesn't really work well with our grid pattern of our cities. We want everything to be perpendicular. Water does not like perpendicularity. And here, this place used to be a lot wetter than it is now, which surprised me. There were so many more waterways flowing through Santa Fe in the past. There were 40 acequias. This is only a little piece of the amount of acequias that are recorded. And they're now missing, they're now covered, and they're now dry. Only 2 of them exist at this moment. A lot of wet in Santa Fe, and not only the streams and the acequias, there were also these wonderful spring-fed wetlands, Cienga, with shallow, non-fluctuating water. That water sat there, wasn't coming and going like an arroyo. It was there all the time. That was present when the Spanish were coming into Santa Fe, and has been studied, a wonderful study by Pliwa, looking at those wet areas. So I'm always looking at how do you find the missing waters of a particular place. You start with historic maps and try and find where the water is, where the waters are running. But it's not always so easy to find because people weren't that interested in water. There was more of it, And they were more interested in roadways. So much more impressive to build a shiny new roadway than to record a sort of mushy old waterway. But when I look at a city, I want to know what water is under those roads that I'm walking on and under all the human-made structures of buildings and parking lots. And I really do want everyone to share that knowledge too. It's important to know that what you're standing on has been drastically changed. It's usually been dried out and it's been hardened from what it once was. We lived in a much soggier place before we started developing things. 130 years ago, Santa Fe was just beribboned with these liquid forms of acequias running through and arroyos running through too. But as the city developed and the government and developers took water away from these waterways by impounding it upstream, things really dried out and hardened and changed. But knowing what's underneath in geologic depth and in history too, changes how you see that current surface that you're walking on. And you learn that there are a lot more stories to be told, and those stories aren't about dryness. They're about wet and soggy areas that are underneath our feet. And I really love to think about the history of water at a particular site. Sometimes I map it in a permanent way, and sometimes it's very temporary, like this project out in the Railyard. The waterways were critical at one time at some point, but have been covered over in another era where they're not so necessary, where all our transit isn't through a waterway. We're much more interested in dry, straight roads than we are in a meandering waterway that we're taking barges or canoes through. But for many of these places in the wetter sway of climate crisis, these waterways are actually coming back to haunt us. These are the areas that flood, strange intersections that flood after a rainstorm, and no one knows why until they put an old map of the historic creeks and realize they're right under that intersection, and they've come up, broken out of their pipes or moving in a different path, but when it rains, they will flood these parts of the grid, the city grid, because they're still there. And water just doesn't really want what we want in our cities and suburbs. We want dry surfaces for dry feet, that's like, so you can wear suede shoes. And we want water to be contained and piped, but water wants to inhale and exhale with flooding and drought. Water wants to expand and contract. It wants to move, and it wants to curve, and it wants to change. So this meandering, soggy, undelineated kind of state is what water wants. And so I'm trying to figure out what are ways that artists can listen to water and inform everyone else about it. I think that's the new job of artists in many ways. So in my art, I'm trying to look at water more closely and then to inform people about the ways of water, the extraordinary hydrologic patterns that water flows in, or showing how it flows in dry times versus how it flows in wet times. And I love to think about what's living in that water that's invisible, like the diatoms that Patricia was mentioning on this project on the East River, showing all that life that's at the very base of the food web, absolutely essential for all of us, completely invisible to our eyes. And showing how water keeps its own time and tides on a lunar process, not a solar cycle. And these kind of processes, these natural processes, are sometimes just too slow for us to understand. The tide is very slow. It's a 6-hour change between high tide and low tide, and you lose interest in the middle. My artworks are kind of like big visual metaphors that explain some aspect of water, some geologic patterns that were invisible to us, like a watershed, fairly invisible. It's invisible to me when I'm standing in a place, and I know it's invisible to most other people too. But my art becomes this tool for translating ecology into legible, readable forms, and showing how streams connect, particularly urban stream connection, which most people don't really sense in their everyday life, is really important. I really love projects that entice people out into their own backyards and their local landscapes and go touch the very water that flows near them, but they haven't really thought about, and see how the water, the creeks and the little runnels go through their neighborhoods. And getting out to collect this stuff is tough, and it's very brambly. It's a leftover landscape, and one that you forget because it's below, the streams are scoured out and below grade, and so it's hard to make them part of how you think about your neighborhood. But when you go and touch them, it's very helpful for your awareness. learning where your car and bike crosses a culverted stream that you can't see, or how a tributary is flowing behind the mall or at the bottom of the playing fields of your school is good. Building this kind of visceral quality to art so that you can make a connection between your body moving through space and the map itself, and your body starts to map. And also giving people a way to feel that connection between rain and the sky, which is something we don't quite really think about, that the whole process that we live in is the fact that water comes out of the sky, hits the ground, and goes back into the ocean and then evaporates. That's a very simplified cycle. But that's sort of what's happening, and to keep us aware of that seems really important. And that idea that these waterways are like capillaries. Instead of carrying blood, they're carrying water from the rain that falls out of the sky down to the sea. And to see those meandering paths that water chooses to travel in, they're very beautiful, and I think they're somehow deeply connective when you see that. And to feel the water patterns, because a lot of people, like myself, learn visually and viscerally. Not everyone wants to look at a chart and figure out how things work. And there's a pleasure in learning kinetically by running along the meanders if you're a kid, even though it's completely dry where you're doing this on the 3rd-story deck of a museum in Canada. And I love this idea of your own kinetic movement making the same motion that water is making. So you run down this path and imitating the movement of water while the rainwater soaks in below you. And I do love charts. I have a big collection of tidal charts. I particularly like Victorian charts because they're a little more ornate. But it's really hard to feel something like the tide, which this is expressing through a chart. But I kind of want to make the tide chart come alive or become a giant thermometer to register change. We need to have something in between us and the natural change for us to see it. It's like how you can't see the wind blowing until you see flags or smoke. That's true with tidal things. It's very hard to register the tide until you put something out there that shows that registration, a quick read, something that what you can see when you're taking the bus across a bridge and you can look down. And I think it's important to know how our tides are working so we don't fear them. When Hurricane Sandy came through New York, people were terrified of the king tide, the high tides, as if they were coming to get you. And if you don't understand how the world works, you tend to go right towards fear. But if you start to understand the system, then you can work with it instead of fearing it and running from it. So I'm always interested to have how art can teach you about that huge clock, this lunar clock that helps run the tide, along with the sun too. And that you can witness that slow movement by actually pausing near a river, making yourself stop to watch what's going on in the river. I myself get a little bored of watching flat water, and it's really fun to see something moving over time. And it's great to have the tide chart be right on the river so you don't have to check your phone through its wet bag. And you could really literally can look out of your bus window, your car window, and see what tide it is. I like to think of eco art as being a great host who's very good at introducing people to patterns of nature, to people who are kind of nervous about what's going on with the grosser parts of nature or the too big to understand parts of nature. So I think that art is the host to introduce the world to the audience that's watching them. But so how can you do this with rain? How do you invite people to enjoy the rain and celebrate the idea that all that fresh water is falling out of the sky is pretty amazing, and yet we're just all sort of hunkered down when it rains. We don't like the soggy. Even in droughty places, we have issues with getting our feet wet when it rains. And we haven't worked out how to live with rain and how to enjoy its qualities. It's going to happen. So we really need to embrace the soggy, because soggy is what water wants. And you can't just stick the wet in pipes and send it away to a place downstream. And you can't just talk about that system either. I did a lot of talking about it, but now I really feel like artists need to do something about it. It just needs to work these systems out differently. Engineers may follow, but artists need to start a new way of looking at water in our world and figuring out what water wants. So what if buildings were required to drink their own rainwater and not just send it down the stream in a pipe? the idea of the bunk bed approach, where we can inhabit a space, but the rain and the soggy and the wetness get to inhabit the space also, like we're in the top bunk and the rain's in the bottom bunk, that makes a big place for sharing the landscape with rain. So this bunk bed where the rain goes down, the plants pop through, and you keep your feet dry, and you have this platform sort of to hover over, makes a much more equitably shared space for people and plants. The humans get a much smaller space than they used to, but they get an intriguing, say, outdoor classroom or a little place to hang out, and the rain gets the lion's share of the landscape, of the real estate, really. So we hover above the wet, and the rain gets all the space below. A lot of these projects take tremendous amounts of collaboration. Some of my collaborators are here in the audience today. And it's across disciplines too to do this. There's ecologists and biologists and hydrogeologists and historians are part of this kind of collaboration of trying to figure out what water wants and how to make it happen. And having these outdoor spaces become very important. During COVID, all of my outdoor classroom spaces were used heavily because it's nice to have a space that's made for you outside, but it doesn't have to be the entire space. And it's great to have a place to celebrate rain in the landscape. My whole joy is when it rains, I think about all the people who are going to go visit these pieces to see the rain instead of saying, oh, we're not going to go outside today because it's too wet. But it is hard to convince people they need less space and that water needs more space, especially when it comes to daycare for cars, parking. And now more than ever, water needs more space for infiltration because there's so much water more water coming out of the sky more quickly. And we need to invite the water into our built spaces instead of trying to drain it out. So art is the aim here. This is a parking lot in Cuyahoga Falls that's been just about 20% of it was taken over to create these swales. And the swales are made with simple engineering. So those engineering and art come together to create a place where we can have new relationships with the soggy, with wetness, with infiltration, and enjoy our parking lots instead of just using them as daycare. So that's going from impervious asphalt to swales of native perennials, which kind of make a parking lot prairie. As an artist, I really want to keep putting forth this idea of sharing better with water and making that into a compelling space instead of a series of grates and scary places with big pipes. How do you make the beauty of rain hitting the ground into something that people enjoy? It's a project at a school in Philadelphia. All this rain rolls off the roof into this rain garden through this sort of tributary-like thing. And the project makes a lot more space for rainwater. It used to be all just turf grass, useless. No one ever went out there. But now it's a much more interesting space for students who come out to read and for pollinators and for birds. I'm really trying to work with art that gives something to other species besides humans. Art is so anthropocentric, it just thinks about the human visiting it. And I'm trying to open up my audience to have birds and caterpillars visiting and eating there. This is Spiral Cafeteria that I just built a couple of weeks ago at a campus. Campuses are often great spaces for putting in these sort of experimental works. And I'm consulting with Doug Talamay all about what species should be growing in order to support caterpillars so that they can become the lunch for the birds. So if you give caterpillars breakfast, they can become lunch for birds. It's truly, I'm more interested in the birds than the caterpillars, but don't tell them. And also it creates a root-filled swale that helps the water infiltrate, unlike turf, which about 70% of the rainwater just rolls right off of grass. So anyone who thinks grass is a green space that's actually functioning, you need to change your mind about that. Because this is an important aspect of what water wants. It wants rugosity. It wants many surfaces and facets and wrinkles to flow through. Water wants scruffy. And we like smooth, impervious surfaces. That's what we make for ourselves. But water wants rougher, scrubby landscapes to meander in. And when we make a more scrubby landscape, we're making a better home for rainwater, which is also better for insects and for birds, and better for our enjoyment too. The much more changing color palette on a place that has a rugosity through perennials and through different surfaces than you get with just grass or concrete. And so embracing the soggy in our built environment is really important, to be ready for the rain when it comes. And in Philadelphia, the rain comes very frequently. We don't have an issue of waiting for rain too often. But in a place like Santa Fe, where you are waiting for the rain, are you setting a place for it at the table? Are you making somewhere that it can infiltrate into, where it can be happy? Are you making a home for the rain? So plant the banks of everything that could be running with scruffy landscapes, and don't let things be smooth and straight. Let things meander. And don't straighten, don't delineate. We have to learn to live with the soggy, to live with the in-between, because there's not a condition of always wet or always dry in nature. It just doesn't work that way. Rivers and streams need to breathe in and out, exhaling in flood, inhaling in drought. They need to change sizes. So to ensure the world is soggy and scruffy is to give place for floods and infiltration. And through art, we can introduce people to this new relationship with water, no longer flat and straight, but something meandering and sometimes green and sometimes soggy and always interesting. And show people where the water runs in our everyday streets, and give people a hands-on format for all sorts of learners, not just the people who learn through charts and graphs, but for visual and kinetic learners too, to understand their local waterways. And show that historic water that's still running underneath the soil, or underneath the pavement. And find ways to support water in doing what it wants. It wants to be meandering, it wants to be soggy, it wants to inhale and exhale, change courses, and to infiltrate. The water is watching us. We need to do a better job. So thank you very much.
The panel portion of the talk and panel today. I'm going to invite 4 additional artists who are what I'm calling local, but one is not so local, but definitely a New Mexico artist, as a way to have a further conversation about some of the things that Stacy's brought up and water issues that they've been addressing in their work as well. So first we have Basia Irland, and I'll just have you come up to the stage and I'll give you a little intro. Basia is a Fulbright scholar, artist, author, and activist who creates international large-scale water projects. She's Professor Emerita, Department of Art at the University of New Mexico, where she founded the Art and Ecology program. Her website contains extensive documentation of collaborations with scientists, essays about global rivers written for National Geographic, and images from her large museum retrospective in the Netherlands. She is a knowledge network expert for the United Nations and represented the United States in a recent international biennale, biennale in Ecuador. Her projects have been featured in over 70 international publications, and four of her books, including her most recent book, What Rivers Know, which she will share with us today. Basia was included in a recent show, maybe some of you saw here at Site Santa Fe in 2023 summer, titled Flow. Was it Go With The Flow? Okay, I had it down as Flow. Go With The Flow, which we're doing right now, for which she performed her ice books on the Santa Fe River near Canyon Road on Mother's Day, which a lot of us attended, and also cited 3 contemplation stations along the Santa Fe River between St. Francis Drive and Seiler Road. So next we have Dominique Mazeaud. Dominique's performances celebrate the wonder of creation while mourning what has been lost or destroyed. Whether environmentally inclined or responding to war, she melds art, activism, and heart. Dominique sees her work as Pax Gaia, a la Thomas Berry, which affirms that a flourishing planet is not possible without a culture of peace. She has written a memoir, The Hardest Secret, with the intention to communicate that life is art and today's art is for Earth's sake. Her multi-year performative work, The Great Cleansing of the Rio Grande, which she performed multi-year from 1987 to 1994, was prominently featured in the important ecofeminist book written by Susie Gablik titled The Reenchantment of Art, which was published in 1995. Next, we have Bobbe Besold. Bobbe is founder of River Runs Through Us, also artist in residence with the Global Warming Express, Global We, and a core member of the Santa Fe River Traditional Community Collaborative and New Mexico Water Defenders. Her public water works include award-winning Underpass Watershed, the Water is Life event at the Santa Fe Botanical Garden, Downstream, a fungi project, Welcome to the Waterhood at Santa Fe Art Institute, Mapping the Santa Fe River for AmeriCorps, the 13th tipping point at Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art, Flash Flood at the Santa Fe Art Institute and 350.org, and Flow, a public procession on Water Street in 2023, which I was a part of, Dominique was a part of, honoring the Rio Chiquito. So, and last we have Paula Castillo. So Paula is a Matista artist whose relationship with natural waterways and human-engineered water systems have inspired an examination of complex and malleable intersections between physical and cultural landscapes in the American Southwest. Recent public-facing work includes Reverse the Curse, juxtaposing Curandissima, is that how you say it? Okay, I try. With mid-20th century engineering practices to examine the impacts of mechanical applications on the health of the Rio Grande River, as well as 3 monumental public sculptures for the Denver Art Museum, her most recent project, which reflect how Matista culture has shaped and been shaped by the landscape. She was also recently awarded a research fellowship by Forecast Public Art to explore connections between climate resilience and community engagement public art. Over the next year, she will create a speculative work reflecting the intersections between environmental justice, biodiversity, and emerging economies for the 2026 World Biodiversity Forum. Pretty powerful panel, huh? that's why I don't have anything, because you talk next. Yeah, here you go, pass this down to her, it's a clicker. Okay, so we're gonna do a little slideshow. Each artist has 5 slides, short 5-minute talks on some of their work and things that are important from their practice. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Basia.
Is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to mention quickly, that was such a fantastic talk, Stacy. Thank you. Very energizing. Stacy and I go way back. It was so interesting. I'll just tell you a bit. We met, there was an environmental conference in Beijing, and we were both invited to be on a panel. And instead of attending the conference, we hired a car and drove up to see this dam that was up in the mountains. I was writing an essay about this dam. Anyway, Stacy mentioned the word dendritic. I think very dendritically all the time and tend to go off in all these tangents. So I actually am going to read this in order to stay within our very, very fast 5 minutes that we have to talk. So following some of the notions that Stacy mentioned, I will talk briefly about the ideas of ephemerality, reciprocity, and community engagement embodied in my ice book sculptures. The hand-carved ice books emphasize the necessity of communal effort, scientific knowledge, and artistic expression to focus on complex issues of climate disruption and watershed restoration by releasing seed-laden ephemeral ice sculptures into rivers. What you're seeing here is a 300-pound book that I hand-carved on the banks of the Rio Grande with an ecological text of cottonwood seeds. As the time-based sculptures float downstream and melt, the native seeds selected in consultation with stream ecologist and botanist are released and begin to plant themselves along riverbanks. With the help of local communities, the ice books are launched into the water. Because I believe strongly that water is alive, we toast the river and say, may you flow and may you always flow clean. In Ohio, which these images you're seeing here, usually the sculptures are released from the shoreline, but in this case we had a whole flotilla of kayaks and all the ice books were released from kayaks. We had so much fun. Reciprocity is important to me, so I always create gifts for the participants in my projects. Here I am at the confluence of the Pecos and the Rio Grande, getting river clay to use in making small canteens that were handed out to several hundred participants in this one. This was a 5-year-long project along the Rio Grande. So you already mentioned the show here, which was 2 years ago. I was included in that show, as was Paula. Going with the Flow, Art, Actions, and Western Waters, which was curated by Izzy Barr, who's sitting up here in the front, and by Brandy Kalba. That was a fantastic show. We carved 15 ice books that were launched into the Santa Fe River, and this is one of the catalog pages that they have in the bookstore here. On the top left is another 300-pound book with riparian flowers and seeds. On the bottom left, we are placing the books into the water, and on the top right, you can see Lucy with the book of seeds. And here is my most recent book. Not made of ice, that was just published by Texas A&M University Press. What Rivers Know, Listening to the Voices of Global Waterways presents 25 intimate portraits of international rivers, with each essay written in the first person from the perspective of the water. These are all rivers I have visited and ones I have fallen deeply in love with. Readers learn the river's histories, current environmental health status, and evolving relationships with a variety of beings. In addition, I discuss innovative practices for addressing pollution, recycling wastewater, and what steps, if any, are being taken to remedy these ailments. So Kara, who runs the bookshop here at site, has very graciously, she set out all 4 of my books. So I'm hoping all of you will go have a look at those after our talk is over with. So thank you very much.
Here, I can handle this. This one, right?
Hello. Okay, I also have written my notes. Born in Paris in 19... Okay. I'm being welcomed to life again. Born in Paris in 1942 during Second World War, I didn't play in rivers the way many children are known to. I waited a long time. From 1987 to 1994, every month I finally played in a river, truly a life-changing experience, a rebirth of sorts. Well, yeah. So, this is about what the river has taught me. I had a vision for the great cleansing of the Rio Grande by the Rio Grande near Taos, hence the title. I began in the Santa Fe River, her tributary. Every month I picked up where I left off. I really wanted to reach the Rio Grande. Obviously it wasn't to be, at least not yet. When your intention rises from your deepest self, you have a better chance of being heard. Perhaps Bobbe will tell you how our project Rivers Run Through Us was born. Because rivers flow into each other like the Santa Fe into the Rio Grande, they teach us about collaboration. There have been many collaborations. I'll just mention 60 water weaving women at the New Mexico Capitol in 2008, and again in Albuquerque at the Bosque there with Bobbe Besold and Elizabeth Wiseman. Let's see, yeah. So rivers as teachers. Rivers are bodies of water, so are our bodies. 50 to 70%. That similarity teaches us about interconnectedness and oneness. Even in a river that has very little water or none for long stretches, you still feel the energy, like the spirit of a physically departed body. When walking in the urbanized areas, you witness how sand and gravel mining have affected her. Witnessing that state makes you want to become a water protector. Knowing all that they do for us, bring us the marvel of flow, nourish us, sometimes transport us, they open our hearts with gratitude. Also more from my own riveries. Rivers whisper stories. Imagine 2 fully grown ears of corn I found a little ways past downtown. Rivers make you ask important question. Why did I find a statue of Jesus? What was going through the mind of the person who did it? And of course, when you retrieve all the drug paraphernalia, you wonder about the state of those who use them. When you find a purse filled with torn, empty donation envelopes labeled Guadalupe Church, you become a detective. Playing, that's what I call my arting. Playing and praying. The two are intrinsic for me. Since 1979, my path has been seeking what is the spiritual in art in our time. First as a gallerist, curator, looking for it in other artists, and then in the mysterious ways of spirit, being called to speak as one myself. My work is art, activism, and heart. When one's heart gets broken over the state of the earth, creativity gets unleashed, and then you find your own form. Praying is not about reading holy scriptures, it's about awareness in action, to use the L word, love in action. I feel part of a new wave of poets. We pour our cries upon seeing our wasteland. Next, Bobby. The river has taught me not to be afraid of my grief, especially when it is about war. I first began my Tears of the World performances in 2001 for Iraq. This one was for Ukraine on February 24th, 2023, the first anniversary of that terrible war. Earlier this week, on Earth Day, it was Tears for the Children of the World. We also sing the miracle of our beautiful earth. Art and life are one again. Our hearts are open, we're artists. As poet Mary Oliver put it, come to the pond of your imagination. Thank you.
My glasses are down there. But I need to turn on. Thank you, Diana. You're welcome. Where are they? In that black bag.
Oh,
Just hand me that. No, not that one. This one, under the chair. Yeah. Yeah.
You got it. This is teamwork. You're a peach.
Oh, you're in that. All right. There they are.
So this is from Artists in Time of War. This is Howard Zinn speaking here. He says, when I think of the relationship between artists and society, and for me, the question is always what it could be rather than what it is, I think of the word transcendent. It is a word that I never use in public, but it's the only word I can come up with to describe what I think about the role of artists. By transcendent, I mean that the artist transcends the immediate, transcends the here and now, transcends the madness of the world, and transcends terrorism and war. And that was from a speech that Zinn gave. All right, so this first slide is from an amazing project that was instigated by Bill McKibben when he was with 350.org, and Diane Karp, who's here, who is the head of the Art Institute. And this is a satellite map of the Santa Fe River, not the whole river, but as you can see, there's the river. There's this little blue part in there. That's about 1,000 people that gathered together for that satellite photograph, holding up blue pieces of cardboard, blue sheets, blue towels, blue tarps, blue stuff, and we brought water back to the river. And I mean, there were so many amazing people that worked on that and made it possible that the names, the list is long. It was extraordinary. So, why would we do that? And, it was a way to talk about climate change, the climate crisis. It was a way to deal with a landscape that we have that is truly affected and impacted by humanity and what we have done and our ideas of water. As Stacy talked about, putting water in pipes, we also create dams. There are 2 dams in the upper watershed of the Santa Fe River, and that impacts how much water comes down. We also have channelized the Santa Fe River. And so what we do to water, we do to ourselves. This is not okay. Water is the first medicine, and water was one of the very first things created when our universe was created. Water is everywhere in the universe. It's not just here. We're blessed to have a lot of water here, and water that we can bathe in and drink and, and nurture our lives. Okay, Paula, ready for the next one. And this is a project that I did with Dominique, and this is at the Bosque in Albuquerque. This is 60 water weaving women, and this is another really great example of how collaboration is such a beautiful thing. Dominique brought the fact that we needed to have all women and wear white. I got obsessed with, we have to have buckets. So everybody was asked to bring a bucket. There we are. The person in the front is Mari Sato. She is an amazing singer, performer, and she brought the vocalization for us. And we also worked with Elizabeth Wiseman, who is a theater person. So the organization of that, we walked along here, we crossed over a little bridge, we went to the other side, we put our buckets into the water, pulled up the buckets full of water. It was a ritual, it was a ceremony, it was an acknowledging water and the importance of water. These little plastic containers contain water from the Santa Fe River, from the upper watershed, collected from the upper watershed, all the way to the Rio Grande. They're labeled with the GPS coordinates. And Dominique and I and Valerie Martinez walked the length of the Santa Fe River in 2012 from the upper watershed to the Rio Grande. This was a project that really began with Dominique and I talking about doing that. And it took a couple of years to actually, before we were able to put our feet on the river, in the river, and be with the river. It took 5 days. We camped along the way. We had a lot of support from amazing people. Dominique here is pouring the water from these bottles back into the river. This was at the 10-year anniversary of our walk. And we did that because I was sure that we would be able to have that water tested, but it turned out that water, if you want to test it for certain kinds of things, you have to do it really soon. And it was 5 days carrying some of that water along, and then, another while before we found out that, we're not going to be able to have the water tested. So we returned the river water to the river. This is a project called Flow that I did in 2023 with Joe Christian, who is one of the founders of Wise Fool, New Mexico, who are actually doing a performance in the Railyard as we speak. But this project was to recognize the Rio Chiquito, which is also known as Water Street in Santa Fe. And when we were working on Rivers Run Through Us, Dominique and Valerie and I did a lot of studying of the river, talked to many, many people who live along the river, and learned a huge amount. Stacy mentioned Tara Plewa. She did a dissertation about the Santa Fe River called A Trickle Runs Through It. And in that, she talked about the Rio Chiquito. And the Rio Chiquito began at the intersection of Alameda and Paseo de Peralta. There was a spring there. And the Archbishop Lamy created a pond, stocked it with fish, planted lush gardens there. There are amazing photographs of that place. And then that little river flowed along and joined the Santa Fe River at the where the church at the Guadalupe church is. So this event, there is Axel art over here. We did. Matthew is here, and he offered amazing support for us, hauling some stuff around. And then up in the top again is Marisato. There were banners, there were dancers, there was music, there was ceremony, and there was a cantastoria, which is a verbal or a visual poem, often sung, and that touched on the history. The one thing that you can't see in this image is that there was a mural that was done to celebrate the Rio Chiquito and our water. And Autumn, what's Autumn's last name? Thank you. Anyway, that was amazing, and it was a temporary mural. I have always wanted to paint Water Street blue, and so working with Stacy on Friday, bringing water back over here, you know, has woken that wish up. So this was a way to bring water back into Santa Fe on Water Street, the Rio Chiquito, and the procession went all the way from that spring to the Santa Fe River. Next, Paula, we're almost there. Oh, that's it? There's one more. I got it. This is, I would like you all to read this with me. Ready? First air, then water, then food. All else is additional. And that's an Oneida saying. And it's on a piece of plywood in my yard at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It's so wonderful to be here today in conversation with Stacy Levy and all of you. Stacy and I, Basia, actually, I think I met Stacy before you did. It is competition. We have a connection with our youth before all of this began to flourish. Probably for myself, I can't speak for Stacy. I think you were probably born this way, Stacy. When we were undergrads at Yale University together many, many years ago. It's really wonderful to see Stacy's project here in Santa Fe. It's so epic. I imagine a lot of you participated in it, and if you haven't seen it, please get out and walk it. It's so thoughtful and epic and connects so beautifully with Stacy's, I would call it a very optimistic perspective about humans and the space that we share with this terrestrial landscape. So thank you, Stacy. Did I not show that one? That's the map that Stacy shared with us. Okay, yeah, it is a great map. Some of you may recognize this. This is it's not quite an aerial view. It's a photograph looking down in the Abiquiu area. The idea that Santa Fe was once green or lush, thanks to acequias, is a very powerful one. And as someone who is from New Mexico, I've seen how some stories of acequias can flatten what was and still is a deeply contested terrain. What we call green often privileges a biased lens, a belief that being lush with vegetation equals vitality. In places like New Mexico, dryness is its own special, beautiful richness. This is the Acequia Commission out in Jemez Pueblo. Acequias are often romanticized. They're described as communal, equitable, rooted in tradition. But we have to remember that much of the New Mexico acequia tradition emerged through conquest and displacement of indigenous water practices, of lands, of entire relationships to water. Acequias encode human hierarchies, women historically excluded from the conversation, landowners holding all the power, indigenous system being completely overwritten. Today, acequias are still actively used in many Indo-Hispanic villages in northern New Mexico, but they sit in conflict with the legacy of environmental injustice. This is the aftermath of a woman whose family ranch and acequias was destroyed by the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire. So let's shift to the now, to the immediacy of climate precarity in the Southwest. In 2022, we all remember the Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon fire, which was ignited as a prescribed burn by the US Forest Service, compounded by centuries of human-induced climate challenges and forest management issues, the largest in New Mexico history. It didn't just burn forests. It scorched watersheds, destabilized mountainsides, and the massive erosion that followed buried and destroyed acequias. This whole challenge that we're talking about today isn't just a crisis of infrastructure. It's a crisis of human choices, of the tension between nature-based solutions, as all of you have mentioned, and overly engineered human-based solutions. What does it mean, for example, to rebuild those acequias in Mora that were devastated by this fire? I'd like to share the project that I started in 2021 called Reverse the Curse, that was showcased here at site for Go with the Flow. I thought it was going, thank you, Lucy. I thought it was going with the flow. This project showcased the magic and ritual of curanderismo, which is a liminal healing practice, often about humans, but I wanted to imagine it for our environment. And I really wanted to establish a precedence of giving water back to the Rio Grande, a river that has no legal right to any of the water that she carries. Once upon a time, the Earth's terrestrial landscape taught us all how to live. The landscape, as Stacy mentioned so beautifully, wasn't simply a resource. It still is, an active political actor with its own agency, its own demands. As summers become hotter and longer and winters milder and drier, learning how to cope with worsening water scarcity and prolonged droughts is taking on new urgency, as we all know who live here in the New Mexico area. And acequias, for all their complexity and coded hierarchies, I've discovered, hold remarkable potential as climate adaptive structures. They are an efficient and cost-effective way to provide water to communities. And unlike the large-scale irrigation systems managed by labyrinthian bureaucratic agencies like the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District in central southern New Mexico, acequias arose from communal care and autonomy and are still able in New Mexico to maintain some of that autonomy, although everything in today's world in New Mexico does go through the New Mexico Water Engineers Department. But they have some interesting quirks about them, the acequias in the north, that allows for some autonomy, which is really interesting. They're not governed by distant bureaucracies, even though they're cataloged by a bureaucracy. They're governed by neighbors, by families, by shared seasonal memories. Yes, they hold a legacy of exclusion and entitlement, but they also hold a living potential to help us face climate precarity with something more than a narrow view of infrastructure. They act as ecological bridges where intimate human engineering meets land's own needs and resilience. They imitate ecological corridors to anchor biodiversity. They root people to place, not just in use, but in responsibility. So yes, let's celebrate water heritage. Let's also ask what also what else that heritage might hold. I'd like to thank Stacy again and Patricia Watts at ecoartspace, not only for the beauty of Missing Waters, but for bringing it here to New Mexico. For inviting me to re-engage and to rethink acequias, not just as artifacts of the past, but as living, evolving systems with something urgent to say to our present. Thank you.
Okay, so this is a lot of information. I'm sure you're all, I mean, these are all incredible artists who are doing incredible work. This is a lot of content to digest, and what Paula just said, I think also got a lot of us thinking. I know it did for me. I was gonna just share with you a concept that myself and two other curators last summer proposed to the city. I'll go through it, move through it quickly, because we do want to pose some questions to you and get your responses and hear from the artists about their water concerns, because definitely Paula just brought up a lot of things that you know, we should probably be talking about. But okay, let me. So, as a curator of art and ecology, in 1997, I came up with the concept of ecoartspace as a place. That place really has never been developed yet. And last summer, when Joy Robal, are you here in the audience? She was supposed to be here today. She's here. We got together at a little coffee shop, and I'm like, you know, we need a watershed center, you know, that thing that ecoartspace was supposed to be that never became. And through the years, I have been invited by other cities, like the city of Boise in Idaho, who has, in fact, let's see, they have a wastewater plant that they call their water renewal facility, WRF. It's operated by the city. They've spent $3 million on art for this center. So I came in early to share with them artists who were doing this work. So there are examples out there. In the 90s, there weren't that many watershed centers yet. There are a lot now, but most of them are operated by cities. And yeah, so 15 years ago, I was also hired by the city of San Jose to do select an artist for a wastewater treatment plant. You know, these are early opportunities that artists got very excited about, to be able to collaborate with scientists to do, you know, infrastructure projects. And Stacy's one of the earliest artists who was doing this in the 90s. So I'm just gonna go through real quickly what we came up with. It's Joy Robal and Dr. Laura Evans and myself who made this proposal to the city last summer, called Fae Shed. And it was supposed to be for the warehouse that's on the other side of the rail, the tracks, the train tracks here. Oh, so that first, whoop, that didn't go. To go back, oh there. So one of the key spaces was to be an immersive water experience, and that was going to be kind of a paid, you know, like half-hour immersion. We were also going to have a cafe called Flow Cafe. Everything had a water theme. We filled that 18,000 square feet with everything about water. It was a lot of fun. We were one of 4 finalists, but we were not selected. So Flow was to be a place, yeah, with community tables where people could come together and, you know, talk about issues like we're talking today, and, you know, come up with solutions. And, you know, it was going to be like a little library too, with books you could access. We were also going to have a water store that was going to be called White Shell Water Place, Tewa, named for Santa Fe, Ogopoge. So you could get your water bottles filled up, you could buy water bottles. There was going to be a mural of the Santa Fe watershed in there. Upstairs, we were going to have, it has a whole long name, the New Mexico Center for Dematerialized Arts, NMCDA. It was going to have a creative studio, storytelling lab. We even saw it kind of as a cabaret space where in the evenings we could have food and drinks up there, but also media centers where we could connect with other watersheds in other parts of the world who were dealing with similar issues of drought or flooding, knowing that we're not alone, and to share knowledge. And that's the three of us here celebrating after we gave our final presentation. But it would also have a gallery, kind of a reading room and gallery that was going to be called ecoartspace. So I just am throwing it out as that it could still be a possibility, even though it might not be here right on the Railyard. But this is some of the concepts that we came up with for composting, toilet demonstrations, gray water systems, to water outdoor gardens, rainwater roof catchment system, and of course art. You can see Stacy's Missing Waters is already in the plan there. So we're going to leave it on this image, and I'm just going to acknowledge that the reason why we were going to just have Stacy do a talk, and I thought, whenever people give talks in town, sometimes other artists feel left out. It's like, well, I've been doing that too for a long time, and I was like, let's bring together some of the artists who've been doing this for a long time, like Basia and Dominique and Bobbe and all of you. And so there are others, and I just wanted to make a quick acknowledgement that Frances Whitehead, the image that you saw at the beginning of this presentation, is the actual artwork that it became, and that is the Santa Fe watershed and all the waters that flow through it, and in the center where the red lines meet is where Santa Fe is. So Frances Whitehead lives in town. She is a local artist now. She's from Chicago, but she is out of town right now and couldn't join us. I also wanted to acknowledge that Helen and Newton Harrison, from 2003 to 2008, both of them are now deceased, spent time here and worked through with Diane Karp to do an exhibition, Santa Fe Drain Basin, Lessons from the Genius of Place. And then also Diane invited me in 2013 to do another water-based show called Shifting Baselines with Cynthia Hooper and Hugh Pocock. Cynthia from Northern California and Hugh from Baltimore. So this is a part where I'm going to pose some questions to the audience, and we have someone who's going to hand out some, what do we call them?
Blue opinion.
Opinion handkerchiefs. So they are to represent, oops, now what am I dropping? Okay. No, we're not going to move it. It's okay. We're not going to move the slides again. We're not trying to turn okay, the handkerchiefs are being passed around. There's only 30, so this is a good 24, sorry. Some of them are missing.
They've been dyed with
Indigo, yes, we did a little indigo dyeing party. So we're going to ask you to wave them if you are a yes. Yes. Or your water bottle. Yeah. And you can keep them. So earlier this month, Governor Lujan Grisham signed into legislation one Senate and 3 House environmental protection bills based on a strategic 50-year water action plan to address conservation of freshwater resources, enhanced water quality protections, and to protect residents from harmful PFAS chemicals. It's free to download online and brings up important water issues that the state faces into the future. How many of you can wave your flag, you can wave your water. How many of you know about this water action plan, have heard about it or downloaded it? Oh, good, okay. So to read the room, wave your flag if you are a yes. How many of you are concerned about the availability of water due to extreme climate change events for the future of Santa Fe? Oh, everybody. How many of you are concerned about the infrastructure that supports the delivery of healthy water in Santa Fe? How many of you are concerned about the education or literacy of water conservation by the inhabitants of Santa Fe? Okay, that was a universal. Oh, do you have one? So I'm just going to pass, or we have enough speakers here to come up with some of their concerns, but we also want to hear from you, so we'll hear from some of our panelists first.
But the one thing I want you all to know is that our senator, one of our senators, Ben Ray Lujan, just did a town hall. And in that town hall, he told us that the federal government has a funding for aqueducts for irrigation purposes, and that includes our acequias here in New Mexico. But they are not going to be funding the acequias in New Mexico because they're not called aqueducts. So I think you all should be aware and very concerned about that, and I don't know what you want to do, but it would be fabulous if you could do something.
I would be glad that acequias are not funded, because as soon as you fund things, you make things straight and put them in culverts.
Sorry, Bobby.
Well, they would, acequias are awesome. They exist, they don't need to be changed, my opinion. They don't need to be coated with concrete. Yeah, no, and I'm just saying in New Mexico, I'm not disagreeing with you, and I think it's wonderful that Senator Lujan is talking about this. I think that my concern stems from the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District. The sharing of water, the Rio Grande is kind of like a migrant without a home, but everybody taking everything from it, and this infrastructure, like concrete, like straightening, like anything that costs money, is the purpose is to make the water get somewhere quicker, because we have to, because we're required to by law. And I would prefer a pirate method of don't fund anything. Please do not fund acequias.
Well, I agree with that.
I want to just quickly give you one example that there was a project I did many, many years ago. The Albuquerque Museum, the director of the Albuquerque Museum at that time, emailed me and asked if I would do a fountain for the museum. And I just said no, flat out, because of where we live. And oftentimes, public fountains are turned off because there's lack of groundwater. So I thought about it for a while, and I called him back and I said, would you allow me to put a stock tank on the roof of the museum? And thankfully, he said yes. So if you're ever at the Albuquerque Museum, you can go into it's towards the back of the museum in an outdoor atrium. And there is a fountain. There's 3 cast bronze arms that were cast after my arms. And anytime there is rain, it activates the fountain. So it goes down through the set of 3 arms into a drain and then out to the back of the museum to feed plants. It's called Desert Fountain. And I have friends who will call and they'll say, Basia, it's raining. I'm going down to the museum.
Any other comments?
Well, I think it's really interesting to hear the differences of water according to region too. And that's what's so fascinating. I'm so glad we have this panel, because I come from a fairly wet region. In fact, getting a little too wet in certain ways and having sunny day flooding in places. But to hear the different water regimes and to compare notes and to get an in-depth sense of acequias and that history of them, because my history kind of stops with the acequia builders and I never went back farther, and it's really incredible to hear how that overlay of a Spanish and then an Arab system brought over to the New World was or not the New World, but the new as seen by the Spanish, was such an overlay on an existing system, something you don't know about. So it just show that the hive mind is a very important part about making work about water, is you need to hear a lot of different takes on it too. And you have to be very open.
On native, yes.
Right, yes, yes. As things are always laid on other things, right? Like dogs peeing on a smell, yes. And so it's really interesting that you realize that water changes everywhere, but you have to discuss it intensely to really know it. It's not something you can do with one mind, and that's the kind of art I'm hoping that we're gonna go to, is the multi-minded art that also takes other species into consideration.
So we'd love to hear from you all. Izzy's got the mic.
I do. One thing I was standing back there, and no offense to the handful of men who are here, but I'm sorry, it's a beautiful picture. We are run almost entirely, our organization is almost entirely women, and women just get shit done. So I really appreciate all of you, and I love this as a visual here. Questions? Anybody have questions?
You guys can use, there's two there that you guys can use.
I'm curious if any of you are working on or know of someone working on the connection between water and wildlife. Because another thing that happens is as soon as you put water in a ditch, the wildlife don't have access to their drinking water anymore. So has anybody looked at the wild creature connection to waterways?
Nobody?
Well, there is a project here in Mexico of building roadways that go across, and they have those, like Canada, my son is here from Canada. Canada was one of the leaders of building those, and those are super important. So they are working on that here in New Mexico now to try to help the animals so they don't become roadkill.
But one of the things that's very important is diversity that comes with water. If you take the water away, you lose your diversity, and you also lose connectivity. We always think, oh, there's a little piece of nature over here. That's nice for everybody, but nothing can get to it, and it doesn't connect to other places to be when everyone's eating what's going on there. So connectivity between places is essential, and what does water do best but connect things? It always runs a cycle. So that's something that has to be thought of whenever you're dealing with water.
The new administration regime?
The new administration has knocked out New Mexico's waters because we're not connected. Because the Clean Water Act only says if you're connected and navigable and so forth. Almost nothing in this state is navigable or connected all the time. I mean, it's intermittent streams and so on. So.
But the vegetation remembers the water too. So when you have those healthy banks that are holding a certain amount of moisture, at least holding shade, there's more of water in a riparian landscape than there is in an area that wasn't next to water. So, but the administration today can't even be considered as any but kind of sensibility.
So Lucy, SB 21 and 22, which did go through and were signed by the governor, which are not perfect, trust me, addressed the disaster that was created by Sackett versus the Environmental Protection Agency, which was a private home that demanded that they were given permission to build on a wetland. And it went to the Supreme Court after being found for the EPA in all the lower courts. Got to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, if it's not constantly wet, then it's not a wetland. And so the EPA was reduced to only protecting waterways that are constant flow. And as Paula, sort of intimated, and she's absolutely right, 95% of the waterways and the wetlands in New Mexico are not constant flow, even the Rio Grande. And so as a result, none of our waters
were protected any longer. And thank you, Peter Worth, good guy. It's not perfect. He had to compromise 1 billion times and leave the oil industry out of oversight, but he has returned regulations under the state laws so that our waterways are once again essentially as protected as they used to be under the EPA, which was not great. The other thing I was going to say is one of the artists who we've lost, who did remarkable work dealing with water and landscape and art and wildlife, was Patricia Johansson. And Patricia's waste processing proposal for the Petaluma waste processing plant that won is now a wildlife refuge and a remarkable environmental space. And the reason that they managed it was there were two endangered things, one a frog and one a mouse, and they had to be considered. And Patricia did a phenomenal job with ponds and plant life and transformed a wasteland into a wildlife refuge. You artists are doing the work we all need, and we all need more of it. And if we could get artists involved in the acequia system, not just documenting like Sharon Stewart, but really engaged with the communities, I think we'd have a better shot.
I was going to ask if there's like a resource, because Stacy's PowerPoint was inspiring, kind of a nice guide to maybe inspire people in their own backyards to be ready for the rain, and I really enjoy that topic. And so I was just wondering if there is an online informational resource to send people to maybe build on and share these ideas of how to be ready for the rain. And my other question was to ask how to assist the Rio Grande with helping, I don't know, water find its way into the river as we're getting into these drier seasons. And yeah, that's my question.
Do any of you know of a resource? There isn't a particular one that I can think of.
Stacy's website.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
We'll talk it out.
Regarding the Rio Grande question, that's such a good question. I feel, I mean, Stacy's talk just made me feel so optimistic, so thank you. I feel so pessimistic so often. I mean, the Rio Grande, when you start investigating it on any level, you know, with depth, surface, it's just, it is a controlled entity, hyper-controlled, and I don't know how something that is so fierce, and as I said, is a political actor in this space and has been for millions of years. How could we as humans come in so quickly and contain it and mess it up so quickly that we're actually, the things that we did to the Rio Grande in the 70s, we're taking out. All those jetty jacks that were put in to straighten the banks, now they're realizing, oh, this is terrible. It's doing all these other things that we didn't intend. And so, you know, merely 50 years later, they're removing all these, humans are removing the things that they said, this is the plan, rather than sort of taking a step back and being thoughtful about it. But I guess that is the human way, but I feel like we should know more now. I just don't know, even if we did know how to do it, how does a progressive community untangle decades, centuries of poor political human choices?
It's a very, very complex when you're dealing with the Rio Grande. My book, the last chapter is all about the Rio Grande. And one of the problems that I have found over the years is that most people refer to water as a resource. And it gets my goat. I get really angry whenever I hear that. Like at UNM, we have the Water Resource Management program. And I have had discussions over the years with the director of that program. Just change it to the water program. Because when you use that word resource, it means something to be utilized, something to be used, instead of thinking it as a living being with reverence. And yeah, so yeah, so there, I think that if we could just shift that one thing, just there, that one word even, then you begin thinking about it as something living, and begin, hopefully anyway, to treat it then.
I like your fountain that it only uses rain when it's there, or you only using water when it's available. So I think thinking about it more in that way is not a constant thing we should be entitled to having.
Thank you.
So a little thing about language, just for a second here. Reframing, first of all, if we call each other by a pronoun, they, he, she, what, something like that. We're not it. Why is water it? Why do we frame water using the word it? So, yeah.
And there's some people who have questions. Oh, actually, we're actually over our time limit here, so I'm gonna do one more question. I appreciate everybody's.
This is actually a comment. Thank you so much for your question about what can I do to sort of help keep water in our land. Well, there are a couple of things. There is an organization called Regenesis, and it's a permaculture organization, and I'm not sure if it's still in business. It is, okay. Look up Regenesis. They are the most fabulous organization. And they're all about permaculture. And again, look up permaculture, because that's all about what we're talking about. And so 2 things you can do is you can build swales wherever you go, literally. And you do that by sticks, leaves, debris, anywhere you see the channels of water, just like this, the contour of the land, make a little dam everywhere. Wherever we go hiking,
The person
same
sitting next
thing.
to you. William Gilbert. Bill Gilbert was in the show, a lot of fun.
Hey, you see? I mean, we are all dam builders in a positive sense of the word. But just if we all did a little bit of putting sticks across areas where you see water damage, that's what we can do. And swales.
It's been really great hearing all of you ladies, and because I feel like you're part of a larger community of women who have really championed these issues for the last 30 years, I wonder what you have to tell future generation women artists who are interested in these issues, and what kind of advice you'd give them.
One thing that I do feel strongly about is because I work in the public sector and I have to deal with a lot of stakeholders who I used to envision as sirloin stakeholders, and now I realize they're opposite. And the important thing is everyone has their own agenda, and it's very hard as you're searching for money and permissions to do these projects to remember who really is the client, and nature has to be your client. You cannot think, even though the person is writing your check may be human, you're working for nature, you're working for water, or you're working for a certain species, but you have to keep your focus on, this feels like my binky that you're putting back in. You have to keep the idea of nature being the client makes you build very differently when you're making art, or architecture, or engineering. So that would be my advice.
His girlfriend's parents so that affected good timing on that. Yeah. You guys visiting about less wise and more pain. And I'm doing that as a content thing that I do.
Oh, we're that way. Yeah, I went through. Oh, okay. My car's that way. Oh, okay. I'll just see that. Yeah. Oh, good. Here's a little. It's just the bottom. I don't want that one. What's the heart of it?
Right, the data is irregular. Because you're dealing with why they do this. Interested in some sort of But yesterday, when I left, I was splitting headaches just from leaning over and dehydration. We were both there from like 10 to 6:30.